This morning, Representative Chip Roy bashed the continuing resolution that could prevent the government from shutting down this week if Congress can pass it. Watch.
Swamp's going to swamp, right? 1,400 pages. Still haven't seen the text. Multiple subject matters. Important healthcare legislation in the context of extenders piled on the back of a 3-month CR with about $110 billion unpaid for, $25 billion of healthcare policy, half of which is fake pay for, being sold that is pay for because they're gimmicks and shuffling around the decks. Things like E15, which we didn't even have a full debate on. This is not the way to do business, right? And so, we said we'd do something different. Since we've been given the majority again, we're adding $330 billion in literally totally unpaid for additional deficit spending just since November 5th in 45 days. I don't see how that's doing what we're supposed to be doing.
All right, now let's go all the way back to September when Speaker Johnson told us this wouldn't happen.
The leader just noted we have broken the Christmas omni, and I have no intention of going back to that terrible tradition. So there won't be a Christmas omnibus. As somebody asked me in the hallway a little while ago, will there be many buses? We don't want any buses. We're not going to do any buses, okay? We'll deal with that in the lame duck, and I'm going to plead, I'm going to urge the Senate to do their job.
No buses. I don't know. He might want to take that back. Here to break it all down for us is Matthew Peterson. He's the editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford. So, Chris, I look at this, and some Republicans are out there calling the CR garbage and a dumpster fire right now. So what kind of mess do we have going on in the swamp right now?
You've got business as usual going on in the swamp right now. And, as annoying as Mike Johnson can sometimes be, he's not actually like a bad player in this. He's just someone who he can't find someone in Washington, D.C. who he's not going to make a promise to. He says, he tells everyone everywhere that he'll give them everything. And what ends up happening is he disappoints basically everyone everywhere on everything, because it's a lot more difficult than that. Now he's stuck between a couple of different hard places. They've got a deadline, which, for whatever reason, like Alzheimer's patients, every year seems to surprise the Congress. The United States government is always going to run out of money. You know this months and months in advance, sometimes a whole year in advance, and it always ends up with a last-minute scramble as they try to make this promise or that promise. Now you've got the agricultural Republicans who are looking for different kinds of relief for farmers who have been struggling. They're an important group to mollify. They were actually hit pretty hard by Donald Trump's trade wars in the past with Canada and Mexico. They're probably going to be hit hard by those sorts of things again. So there's someone to work with. Then you end up with ethanol handouts, E15, like we were just talking about, which is essentially a green energy subsidy now being backed by the GOP because it helps out the farmers. You can see how it gets complicated. You also had promises from the speaker about a different process this time, including the different committee chairmen. Well, that hasn't happened. It's not just conservatives like Chip Roy who are mad. You've got much more moderate or mainstream Republicans, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Jason Smith, who are angry that they haven't been included. It's essentially in that negotiating room for Republicans, Mike Johnson and his chief, Dan Ziegler. Everyone else seems to be boxed out. And even now, you still haven't gotten the text. I actually think it'll probably drop later tonight. They have to get to that 72-hour window, or really they don't, or they get a shutdown. And then everyone's all freaked out about exactly what a shutdown is. Well, honestly, the government shuts down most weekends. You don't get a paycheck on the weekends. You don't get a Social Security check on the weekends. A lot of government offices aren't open on the weekends. So even if it does go past the deadline, it really doesn't matter as long as they fix it by Sunday. You'll get the back pay. You'll get this or that. And honestly, if Republicans are willing to fight, which they're clearly not on this, then you could shut down the government for most of the Christmas holiday. People are not actually getting anything that they really need. A lot of the offices are closed. The paychecks could wait an extra couple days and then reopen when they actually have both the House and the Senate and the presidency in January. But I don't see any appetite for that kind of fight coming down the pike.
Well, before we let the Republicans off the hook, right, it kind of felt like a little deja vu to me earlier today, Bedford, because I had a headline here from March. It says, conservatives furious at Johnson for waiving the GOP's 72-hour rule on a $1.2 trillion government funding bill. And he blamed the White House for the rush on the spending package. Now, it is the Christmas season. So hear me out, right? Somebody in DC, maybe some staffer out there can go buy one of those very large calendars that take up the whole desk, and maybe they can fill it out ahead of time with key dates before we get here. And then we know when the 72 hours is about to approach, and we don't have to have these fights, Peterson.
Yeah, well, I mean, so what we do know about the calendar, right, is Friday, is the deadline Chris already is talking about. So what do you think happens? What's your best guess, Chris, in terms of how this goes down? I mean, it seems like Democrats are more okay with it than Republicans right now. So does this just...
They get their way.
Yeah, so does this just, go through and we're done?
Well, members are already starting to rebook their flights. People who are trying to get out of town Friday night are starting to rebook and expecting that they're going to be here probably until Saturday at least. I mean, if the text drops tonight, you have 72 hours where it gets to go then to passage. If they try to keep that rule, maybe the House passes it late on Friday night, but then it still has to go through the United States Senate. Now, as far as we can tell, the Senate is involved in these negotiations. It seems to be what they call the four corners. You got Hakeem Jeffries for the House Democrats, with Johnson for the House Republicans, with also Schumer and Thune for the Senate and the Senate Republicans and Democrats who are negotiating this. So if that works and that goes, then it should be fairly quick passage by the Senate. But right now, congressmen are already starting to remake their weekend plans. I don't expect, if there's a shutdown, I don't think it lasts more than 24 to 48 hours. I think that they don't have the appetite for it. Everyone just wants to start the new year. Everybody just wants to kick it off and get to January and go home for Christmas. And it's kind of like what they do every year. You could actually probably get some real concessions from the federal government. You could actually, if you had a speaker or a majority leader in the Senate who was willing to push it to the limit and tell members, if you don't break on this and you're not going home for Christmas, you could probably get some real change. But then again, if anybody in D.C. worked as hard as they pretended to work, you could get real change, and they don't.
Well, we've been talking about Donald Trump and his legal victories. There's one that's kind of on hold right now. Judge Juan Marchand ruled that Donald Trump's conviction in the Stormy Daniels hush money case should not be thrown out, despite the Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity. So how is this going to impact his case?
It's all so much up in the air as it comes down to the authorities with him actually as a sitting president. I would say that this is just probably going to end up as another example of Democrats thinking, oh, they finally got him. The lawfare is finally going to work. Now he's going to prison. That's completely insane. They push a constitutional crisis. They're still going to go after Trump. But I still think at this moment, it's a lot of demoralization on the American left. The lawfare didn't work. The politics of it didn't work. The J6 investigations, fiasco, and imprisonments didn't work, at least not in the president. It's hurt a lot of innocent people and a lot of folks along the way. I don't think that this is going to be their silver bullet to finally take him down.
Well, before we take our leave with you, 60 seconds, we got to throw this over to you. Electoral College. I love to talk about it because the founders, it's one of the only things, all the founders walked away from the Constitution after they ratified it thinking, I didn't get what I wanted. But they were all almost uniformly proud of the Electoral College as a way to solve the problem of, pure democratic vote. This has been an issue our entire lives. It will continue to be. But as you know, over in the Senate, the Democrats have introduced legislation to end the Electoral College, even though Donald Trump won both the Electoral College, of course, and the popular vote. So do you anticipate this bill will get any momentum? Is this just for show, or is this serious?
Well, I think it's a potentially serious threat in the long term, but not this round. We have such terrible civics education in the country that there's a lot of folks out there who don't even realize that the founders were properly and correctly afraid of mob rule, of rule by a simple majority over the entire country. So this is a bill essentially to abolish the Electoral College, which means it's a bill to let the United States be ruled by the decisions of Manhattan and New York City voters and California voters combined. Those are the people who would be in charge of who the president of the United States is. The founders set up a bunch of different guards against us, including, and one of the reasons for it, as you alluded to just there, Matt, and that excellent walk back, was that there was supposed to be a jealousy for the power between the different states that would want to protect their own power against each other. and make sure that New York didn't rule over Virginia, Virginia didn't rule over South Carolina, Massachusetts didn't rule over Rhode Island. That was kind of changed a little bit with the progressive revolts to try and put popularly elected senators in. Now you've got that coming through, and this would be the last step. But at the end of the day, it would completely disenfranchise the voters of New Mexico, South Dakota, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, all these other different states. It's an important system. It's under threat, and honestly, it stinks to say it, but the reality, the silver bullet here is education.
Yeah, well, Chris, I can't wait to see what they sneak into the CR. I'm sure that you're going to break it all down for us tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us.
I'll see you then.
Matt, before we even get on with this show, at some point, I feel like we're going to be breaking down the Federalist Papers, just the way that the show is going.
We have to, because it's ripped from today's headlines. I mean,
it is.
Every day you have someone saying, we need to get rid of this part of the Constitution, right? And that means what we have to explain why these things exist. The other thing is, no one's been taught, as Chris is saying, the real problem is no one's been taught the reason for any of this stuff. So we're the blind leading the blind. We're, arrogant children playing in the ruins of a once great civilization. So we got to talk about that once great civilization if we're going to bring it back.